Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu Al-Samad.
So remember last week when we talked about trying to be on a sort of more regular schedule?
Don't say that, Dan. Don't remind them. Hopefully they'll have forgotten that part.
Well, I welcome everybody to the Church of Wheelbearings because it's Sunday, and so we're worshiping at the altar of speed. Yeah, I don't know. I can't do any better than that. But yeah, it's been a little while, and we're sorry, but there was stuff going on. Like you actually went and checked out some robotic stuff, which we'll talk about, but that had to be pretty cool. Yeah,
it was. But awesome. Yep. Let's talk about what we were driving first.
Yeah. So all right, you know what? I'm so excited by
go first.
This car. All right, because I usually try to make you go first. It's a power game. It's not really. So I had the 2018 Acura TSX A-Spec.
TLX.
And you had this. Yeah, I'm sorry. TLX. Acura with their letter soup kind of thing. They're doing a Cadillac where nobody can figure out what the hell the car is. But it's the TLX A-Spec. And so you had this car a while ago. I think it was September, October of last year.
Yeah, and then I had it again. I had one here in Michigan in the fall, and then I had one in December when I was out in California to go drive the Leaf, the Nissan Leaf, and so I got a chance to play with it out, on some roads out in California at that time. And
so,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
What did you think of it? I mean, we already talked about what my thoughts. Let's hear yours.
Yeah, and it's weird because like I can't recall you, and maybe you're just not as effusive a person as I am, but I can't recall your praise of this car being as excited as I am about it. I'm not sure I want to tell everybody about this car because then the secret will be out, and the A-Spec is going to get sought after, and then it'll get expensive and harder to find. Because I really, really, really liked this car in this particular spec. And maybe it's like sort of the next kind of quietly great enthusiast sedan that we're going to lament when it's gone, but we're not going to actually buy it while it's here. So hopefully I can get over my trepidation about telling people and just like, yes, if you like to drive and you like cars that like to be driven, go buy an A-Spec because it's good.
Yeah, I mean, let the secret out because, in the current market environment where it seems like nobody wants cars anymore, sedans. Everybody wants SUVs and crossovers. Let's get as many people into these things as we can. Let's convince Honda that they need to keep building cars like this.
Yeah, I was very impressed by it, and I didn't expect to be as impressed as I was. I usually like Acuras, but the balance of the TLX A-Spec is just it's almost like they talked to me before they calibrated everything. The suspension it's comfortable. You can feel the travel, the spring travel and the damping and everything, and it all works to take the edge off the road. And yet it still handles really crisply, and the switchable drive modes make a noticeable difference. So if you want it more buttoned down, you can put it into Sport Plus. And it really is kind of a precision weapon in traffic, which I really appreciated because it drives smaller than it is. And part of that is the super handling all-wheel drive that overdrives the rear axle. I think it's like 2.7%. I don't have the press release in front of me, but it overdrives the rear axle so that when you're in the middle of a corner and you exit the corner under power, it will rotate the car. It drives from the rear and it rotates the car around its its axis so that it actually feels smaller than it is, and that's really impressive.
Yeah, and I've driven the like I said, I've driven the TLX A-Spec twice now, and I think the first time I drove it, when I had it here in Michigan, I probably was a little less enthusiastic. When I drove it in California, I liked it a lot more for reasons that I'm not quite sure why. But I really did, I really did enjoy it more when I was in California. And I think, it probably had something to do with having better roads to drive it on, just more interesting roads. Let me put it that way. Having some curves and stuff rather than just, driving on the freeway. And I mean, it's the TLX, I think is a really nice size car. It's not too big, not too small. It's big enough to be really practical. As a family sedan, it's easy enough to, put a couple of child seats in the back if you need to do that. It's got a decent sized trunk. And, as you said, I've always been a fan of Acura's super handling all-wheel drive system. But it's a mouthful of a brand. But basically doing the torque vectoring to on the rear axle to shift a little bit of extra torque to one side or the other as needed to help the car turn in and overcome the understeer that is inherent in all front wheel drive cars. So, I've always appreciated that from the first time I drove it, more than a decade ago, I think, actually on a track in an RDX at that time, and also in the old RL. And, every Acura I've driven with that system, I've really appreciated it. So, I totally agree with your thoughts, especially when you put it in Sport Plus mode. That's where it really starts to come alive. And drive, it's fine, it's quick, but it's just, there's any number of cars that are, feel as good when it's in drive mode, but in Sport Plus, the steering tightens up, everything just feels better.
Yeah, and it's just overall, it's really, really well done. And I don't think that they're making as much noise about it as they could. The weight and the feedback from the steering I thought was unexpectedly great. And this is a driver's car. If you leave it in normal mode, it's a pretty good car and it drives nicely and you're mostly satisfied all the time. It's tight about its responses, and yet it's not harsh. It fills all those practical needs. It has good space. The like you said, the trunk. It's got cup holders galore. Where you need them, and just overall, it fills those family sedan duties. But when you call on it to be more than just a practical thing, when your thoughts go beyond, does remote start also turn on the heated steering wheel? What are the fuel economy ratings? When your balance actually tips toward driving, there's that delicate balance that has to be struck. Usually the balance is between accelerating or turning, and some cars go too far in one direction, say like a Hellcat Charger, which turns amazingly well, but also really its forte is acceleration,
right?
Or turning, which is something more like a Miata, which turns amazingly well, but its forte is not accelerating. So certain performance sedans will wind up balancing that really well. And I think that's one of the things that we've loved about the usual suspects for so many years, is that they strike that balance where they're not the best accelerating. They're not going to win all the quarter mile drags, but
you don't have to, you don't spend your life on a drag strip. You don't have to win every launch from a red light.
Your life is not lived a quarter mile at a time.
No, it's not actually.
No, I agree. But when you want it, it's nice to tow into the engine and get a little power. And that's certainly here. This is, I think, the only version of the TLX with the V6. I don't think you can get the V6 in a non-A-spec TLX. I could be wrong on that, but
yeah, I think you're right. For 2018, I think that may in fact be the case.
And it's a really good engine here. It's 290 horsepower. It's responsive. It has a nice metallic growl to it. Sounds like a sporty engine, and it works really well with the 9-speed automatic. It'll click off quick shifts in Sport Plus. It's very satisfying. There's shift paddles. It's just good at what it does. And I'm also impressed with the way Acura has redesigned the shifter, because everybody's redesigning the shifter in the luxury sedan performance kind of space. BMW has their new thing. The Volvos that I've driven lately have had a different way to put the thing in gear. So Acura has had this for a couple of years where it's push buttons. But when you look at it, it's actually pretty intuitive. So there's the big circular button for drive, and then there's this other little button that you actually pull back towards you. You put your finger into a little slot and pull it back.
It's like a window switch.
Yeah, exactly. So you can operate it without looking at it, and it still makes sense, and it takes up less space than packaging a physical stick that's not connected to anything, but sort of 100 years of convention. So
I'm not as enamored of that system as you are.
Certainly the stick is with something everybody understands, but I got to the point where I thought this was actually a clever and thoughtful way to do it. That thoughtfulness is a theme that goes throughout the car. Everything feels really thought out overall. Even just the interior materials and trim and assembly quality. The assembly quality I thought was stellar on the TLX A-Spec and probably across the TLX range. This is just a very well put together car. It didn't rattle, didn't make any funny noises. It felt really good. I liked the material choices. With this has the black seats. It has a black interior with the Alcantara in the middle of the seats and leather outer things. I was a little disappointed. There's only two options for interior color with the A-Spec, which is like screaming red or black.
Yeah.
I tried to order one on the website with there's a beige interior and there's also I think another like gray interior. You can't get either of those with the A-Spec package, which is a little disappointing. But no, maybe this is just the kind of car I like, and they happen to build one. But I thought it was a really buttoned down sports sedan that lives up to the description of sports sedan, and also can be lived with because it does the sedan thing well, even as it does sport well. So I was impressed, and I don't recall you being as impressed with it, but maybe that's just my selective memory.
Yeah, no, I guess I think when I drove it earlier in the fall, I definitely was not as enamored with it, but when I drove it in California, I liked it a lot more. And I was just checking the feature list on the website, and you can get the V6 in the non-A-Spec TLX as well.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, so you can get either the 2.4 liter 4-cylinder or the V6, and then the A-Spec is V6 only. Right.
It's worth it.
Absolutely.
The bottom line too is like this car there are no options on an A-Spec from what I recall, or there's very few.
Yeah, basically just colors.
Right. It comes with just about everything. And it's like $46,000. That's an unheard of bargain for a car that's this fun to drive.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare that to a BMW or a Mercedes,
right. Yeah, no, they're not as fun to drive at 46. I mean, you have to very carefully select your BMW to make it that fun at 46, and it's not going to have all of the bells and whistles that the A-Spec has. It has a Honda Nav and Honda infotainment, which is getting better.
It's okay. But it also supports Android Auto and CarPlay, and you don't have to pay a subscription fee to use them.
There's that. And like I said, it is getting better. I don't like the dual screen thing, but I figured it out more readily.
That's going away now, though. I mean, starting with the new RDX later this spring, that one's going to a single screen layout. So this is like the last of the dual screen Acuras. Good.
It's an idea that I can understand why they did it. So basically, you've got the lower screen that is a touch screen, and that's where HVAC and all the sort of audio controls and stuff come up. And then you've got the upper screen that is the like nav and other car settings and stuff. And it's just a little confusing to know which is where and to get them both dimmed down to the right level and that kind of stuff. But
I think the rationale was, with the second screen, having that up higher, it's closer to your line of sight, so that you don't have to look as far away from the road to glance over to check the nav screen or anything like that.
Yeah.
Whereas the other screen, which is things you're not going to use as frequently, you can mount that down a little lower.
Yeah, and I'm sure it saves them both real estate and cost when you're putting a bunch of touchscreen buttons on there instead of actual physical controls and stuff. So fine. I get it. It's tough to do. And I don't think it's done great, but it also doesn't completely get in the way of driving. And I know that I went off about Sensus last week for the same thing. There's more limited functionality through this screen, or there's more physical controls to be redundant in the TLX.
I think there's also less modality, so it's not switching modes as much and switching context, whereas with Sensus, you're swiping back and forth between the 3 pages, and for example, I've got a Volvo right now, and when you use Android Auto or CarPlay, it shows up in the middle screen in the lower half of the screen, a portrait mode screen. And if you swipe over to the right screen to get something, to change a setting, it'll bring that up in that back. It'll switch back over to the middle screen and show that setting in the lower half of the screen. And then to go back to the Android Auto screen, you have to swipe back again, tap the Android Auto button to bring it, so it doesn't let you go back and forth easily without doing a lot more swiping and tapping, which is not a good thing. And so, I think even though, in some respects, I think the 2-screen setup that Acura used, is, a little clumsy. I think it's less clumsy than the Sensus layout.
Yeah, I think in my experience, sort of jives with that. So, there is that dual screen thing that I didn't love, but I also got used to it. So, fine. It's just, that was really basically the biggest demerit I could give it. It's a button down car that I really enjoy driving and that I could actually somewhat afford. And it's not a 2-ton Bluetooth accessory, which is where I feel like a lot of cars in this segment are going. They're getting fat, and this doesn't feel fat. It's nimble. It's light on its feet. The other thing that I was really impressed with was the ELS audio system in this thing was awesome.
Yeah, those have always been really good.
It's very, very good. I played it very loud for very many miles. It was good. If you like cars, I feel like this is a good car to tell Alex Roy about. No, it has a great audio system. It has all the driver aids. It has a bunch of ADAS in it. And it also just drives really well. He probably already knows because he knows about all kinds of premium things that I'm not aware of. But I figured since he opened a hi-fi shop in Manhattan, he might appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure he would say that this still sucks because it's an in-car hi-fi system. It can never be even remotely. It can never even approach what you can do with a proper home hi-fi system.
Well, but that wasn't the point I was making. Yes,
I know that, but Alex being Alex, he will say, just get a Morgan 3-wheeler and that should be enough, and then just enjoy the world around you as you drive.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
You don't need an infotainment. You don't need an infotainment system in a car.
I feel like Manhattan is a uniquely practical place to own a Morgan 3-wheeler, where my commute from suburban Massachusetts to suburban Massachusetts, Morgan 3-wheeler would be thrilling, but also
that's one way of describing it.
Yeah. Not practical
if you're all. If you're into those sorts of life-threatening thrills, yeah.
The older I get, the more I am, because I've accepted death.
As you recognize your own mortality, you realize, screw it, I'll just enjoy life while it's here, and when it ends, it ends.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That's fair enough.
What was it? It was some movie. It was like, I want to go, I want to die peacefully in my sleep like my grandfather, not screaming in terror like his passengers.
Good. I
anyway,
like that.
What are you driving?
I had the Toyota, the 2018 Toyota Camry XSE, which it's interesting. Last year, Toyota launched an all new Camry, based on the TNGA platform, which is also used for the Prius. It's a new look for Camry, much more modern and aggressive and coupe-like, just like every other four-door sedan in the last decade. I think overall it's a good look. It's much improved, and the XSE is this sort of sporty variant of the Camry, if there can be such a thing. It's not quite a TLX A-Spec, but it kind of has the, kind of implies that with the visuals, certainly with a much more aggressive front fascia, bigger wheels, quad exhaust pipes, which I'll get back to in a moment. And I think it's a good looking car. I think it's probably the best looking Camry ever. Which is not a high bar to jump over, but it actually is a good looking car. I do like it.
I've seen them out in the wild. The XSE is the one that has the simulated vents in the rear, like the taillights, right? Just below the taillights.
So there are some details that I think are maybe a little bit overdone, like those aforementioned vents. I think they probably could have done without those. They really was not necessary, because like you said, they're fake. And then there's those exhaust pipes, which last week my friend Richard Truitt who was also happened to be driving one of these Camrys, took a look at it and noticed something about it and posted it on Facebook, that the outer exhaust tips, so there's two exhaust tips on each side. The outer exhaust tips were unusually clean relative to the highly soot-coated inner exhaust tips. And if you look underneath and look closely, you'll see that those outer exhaust tips are just kind of welded on appendages that give you the look of a quad outlet exhaust, but there's no actual flow through those outer tips. It's all through the inner tips.
You know what? That's done all the time.
Oh, I know. This is not by any means a new phenomenon. Frankly, I would have preferred a pair of single tips, with slightly larger diameter. But it's not a big deal. Yes, it's kind of a poser thing, like those fake exhausts in the rear corners. But who cares? If you like the look, it's fine.
I don't think we should give them a pass on that, though. I mean, it's like the Spinal Tap effect, right? Like, it doesn't actually do anything. It's just like this Camry goes to 11, and there's not really there's no need for it other than some sort of way to visually differentiate the car. And I don't know, like, it's supposed to be there because the XSE is the most, right? It's
but I think the little deck lid spoiler, the more aggressive front fascia, the bigger wheels, I think those alone do enough to differentiate the car from other Camrys that you don't really need those exhaust tips. You don't need the fake vents. I'd rather keep it more authentic. To the degree you can for such a thing, because although this is the sportier Camry, it's it's not, I wouldn't call it a sports sedan. It's a 2.4 liter or 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, 208 horsepower. It's more than adequate. It's fine for everyday driving. I had no issues with the performance of this thing. It's certainly not going to run with something like that TLX or any of the really sportier variants of some of the other cars you can get out there. Like for example, the the Accord 2-liter turbo, or even a V6 Camry for that matter, because you can get the XSE with a V6. This one, it comes standard with a 4-cylinder. If you want more aggressive performance, I would definitely suggest you go with the V6. But I think for normal everyday driving, if you want something that that's got a sporty look, has a little more grip because it's got bigger wheels and tires. There's nothing wrong with going with this 4-cylinder version. I think, like I say, it's got more than enough performance to let you enjoy driving. And the driving dynamics of this new platform are so much improved over the prior generations that it actually does ride and handle pretty well, and even managed to survive a couple of potholes that I was not able to manage to avoid without blowing out a tire. So that's a good thing. And then the interior is also much improved over past Camrys. Some really nice materials and finish in there. The new Entune 3 infotainment system is better than before. It's built on the automotive grade Linux platform. It definitely performs better. It's faster. The screen is more responsive. It has rotary volume and tuning knobs and a bunch of other buttons on the sides. What it doesn't have yet is when they first showed Entune 3 last year at CES. They demoed it with what's called Smart Device Link, which is the open source version of Ford's Sync App Link system that lets you control, compatible apps right from the head unit. So apps like, for example, Pandora or Spotify, or, there's a whole bunch of other apps that you can control directly from the head unit. It's not like Android Auto or CarPlay, because you're still getting the Toyota interface rather than the, and the same thing, or in a Ford, it would be the Ford Sync interface rather than the Android or Google or Apple interfaces. But you can do voice commands to control those apps, but none of that is actually available on this Camry yet. It will be added at some point. I think it's actually debuting on the new Avalon. And whether I haven't been able to get an answer from Toyota yet on whether there will be a software update to the current, the existing Camrys that have been built since they launched it last year, to enable that. I think there might be, because I'm pretty sure it's the same hardware platform that's going into the Avalon. And the Avalon is also getting support for Apple CarPlay in addition to Smart Device Link. But they haven't said whether that's going to be added to the Camry yet. And so it's an improvement. It's a big improvement over the last Camry. It's quite pleasant to drive. It's driving dynamics are good. It's roomy. And one of the interesting details I noticed in this, if you look at the new Camry in profile, you'll see that the belt line, the lower line of the glass from the A-pillar, it actually dips down a couple of inches at first, and then starts to slowly sweep back up again towards the back of the car. And from the inside of the car, that actually has a surprisingly large influence on the feeling of airiness and also the visibility from the driver's seat. Because instead of feeling like you're sitting down low, inside a tank or inside a bathtub like you do in so many modern cars, the fact that they've dipped down the belt line a little bit, makes the greenhouse feel larger and airier and just makes it feels roomier, and you can see better out of it, which is also is always a positive.
Yeah, my guess is that it just, because you're looking forward so much of the time, it sort of unshrouds that lower sort of periphery and does make it, it's a subtle thing, but it probably makes it feel, like you said, more open.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
This is the TNGA Toyotas are really the first overall Toyota platform that I've had the chance to drive that you know it's going to be pretty good because at its core it's pretty rigid, and depending on the model they've managed to tune it well. I don't know how the XSE has that ride handling balance. Camrys tend to be kind of squishy, but the XSE and the SE are usually the sportier ones. So they
this one definitely feels firmer. There was no squishiness to this car.
Yeah. Was it harsh?
No, it was not harsh at all. And, given the condition of a lot of our roads at this particular moment in time, that would have been very noticeable. So no, driving down the road, you can feel expansion joints, but it doesn't pound you. So, you're aware of their presence, but, it doesn't bounce around. It doesn't slam into those, it soaks them up reasonably well without punishing your backside.
Yeah. And that's, to me, the Camry is sort of like this dichotomy. Everybody derides it on the one hand as the plain vanilla car, but also to do what the Camry does so well takes a lot of investment. When they launched the new Camry, they talked up some of the under the skin stuff that goes into it, like laser screw welding, and they use a lot more structural adhesive in it to make it, just overall it pays off because it makes it feel really, really rigid. And just the attention to constant optimization. It is like the rolling argument for Kaizen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you mentioned the structural adhesive, and this is something that's becoming increasingly common in construction of new vehicles. It used to be that, the various metal panels that make up the structure of the car, there'd be a string of spot welds, along there to join those together. In some cases, you might have a seam weld, going down certain seams, to increase the rigidity. The more contact points, the more, points of adhesion you have, between the various panels, the stronger the overall structure. And one of the advantages to using those structural adhesives, by putting on a bead of structural adhesive, before you join those panels together, and then adding the spot welds, along the way, to hold it all together. And then as it goes into, typically the way it works, as it goes into, it gets painted, and as it goes into the oven to cure the paint, that also cures the adhesive, and that adds a surprising amount of rigidity to the overall structure without adding really very much weight at all. It's like at most typically a couple of pounds, and usually less than that, but it can add, 10, 15, 20% to the structural integrity of the car, of the vehicle. Yeah.
Well, it clearly pays off. So what was the sticker on it?
Sticker on this one was about $35,000, which is, it's on the high end, but again, you compare it to, the sportier versions of any of the current crop of midsize sedans, they're going to be in that, low to mid 30s price range as well. Ford, a Fusion Titanium or Sport, the 2-liter turbo Accord with an automatic, Mazda 6, they're all creeping into that price range now. And this one, was equipped, and one of the things about the new Camry is it comes standard with features like, lane keeping assist and a radar adaptive cruise control, which, and that, with that comes things like automatic emergency braking. There's a pedestrian detection system. So there's a lot of safety features that are built in, even in the base Camry. Both the base Camry and the new Accord both have all these features as standard equipment, which is a good thing, and we're starting to see more and more of that across the board as new vehicles are coming to market. course, one thing to keep in mind is that, just because you have, radar-based adaptive cruise control with automatic emergency braking, doesn't mean it's always going to work. Like, if you were driving home from Detroit in a snowstorm and the front of your car gets caked up with snow and slush and ice and the radar sensor can't see through it, then the system's not going to work. And so
I had that happen.
You can't necessarily rely on it.
No, and that was the thing. Like they've since taken the Acura and they dropped off an Infinity with the dynamic cruise control, and we had a nice snowstorm, and that was the thing. It warned me, forward collision and all of that stuff. It just goes away when the sensor gets kicked up. So you still have to drive the actual car. You have to put your hands on the controls and operate them.
Yeah,
must do.
The cameras are usually, because the cameras are typically mounted behind the windshield, they're usually within the swept area of the wipers. You can usually keep those clean, but depending on how effective your wipers are and what the conditions are, even that, while it may wipe things away, a lot of times you'll still end up with some salt covering the camera, so it still might not be able to see. But one of the things that up until now, most cars, the radar sensor have been mounted down fairly low in the grill, and Delphi recently launched what they call their Raycam. It's a module that has the camera and the radar sensor in one unit, along with the processing that can mount behind the windshield. And that's on the new 2019 Ram. That's actually what they're using is this combined module. So the radar sensor is actually going to be up behind the windshield. So that should help it, in those kinds of conditions, to allow it to keep functioning longer, without getting all caked up with snow and slush and stuff.
Yeah, well, Toyota's making a big push, I think, to make they call it Toyota Safety Sense.
Yeah,
PP, like TSSP. They're making a big push.
They've got a couple of different levels of it, with increasing levels of functionality, and they're planning to make that standard across all of their products by 2019. So as everything gets updated over the next year or so, we'll see that become standard equipment on every Toyota and Lexus vehicle.
Well, I mean, there's going to come a point where the ADAS stuff has really proved its usefulness and its ability to reduce a lot of incidental accidents. So it's going to become like anti-lock brakes or airbags. It'll become required equipment at a certain point, would be my expectation, at least some of it. Like we've got the backup cameras now.
Mm-hmm. And, they're a couple of years ago, NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, announced that they were updating their 5-star ratings, which they tend to do every few years. As cars get better and better, they keep raising the bar, so that you don't always have everything automatically getting 5 stars. They want to keep moving things forward, so they're revising the system, and starting next year, I think next 2019 or 2020, they're going to start factoring in some of the ADAS features like automatic emergency braking towards the 5-star rating system. So in order to keep getting 5 stars, you'll have to have that stuff in there. It won't be mandated by law, but manufacturers love to advertise that stuff. They love to use the 5-star ratings for their marketing and the IIHS top safety picks. And so we'll see those features become standard equipment, so that they can keep advertising that they're getting the top ratings, especially on family oriented vehicles.
Yeah. Well, out of the two cars this week, I mean, I think a $47,000 Acura that's a lot of fun is going to beat a $36,000 Camry that's not as much fun.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't.
Fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think this Camry is a big improvement over the previous generation. And I think anybody that buys one is probably not going to be disappointed. So I think either way, depending on what it is you're looking for, if it's the right car for your needs and your lifestyle, then you'll probably be happy with either one of them.
Yeah, it's just one of those an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about the sensors and stuff. So let's just continue with that. you had mentioned before we started the Ford repair drone patent that dropped this week, and I didn't read that much about it, but it seems like an actual interesting idea that's somewhat terrifying, or just a kind of like Skynet is watching you at all times sort of thing at the same time. So
no, not really. We hear a lot of stuff in the news. Everybody wants to do all kinds of things with drones. You've got, everybody from Uber to Airbus, wants to build passenger drones, for flying robo taxis to take people around cities, which personally I think is a horrible idea, because if you've ever been around a drone, if anybody playing with like a DJI Phantom or anything else, or any other rotorcraft for that example, one of the fundamental problems with rotorcraft, whether it's a helicopter or a drone, an octocopter, whatever it might be, is rotors make noise. They make a lot of noise, and it's one thing to have a single drone, flying around, in your backyard, but imagine life in a city with thousands or tens of thousands of drones buzzing around all the time. The noise pollution from that is going to be horrendous. And I don't want drones delivering everything to us. I don't want them flying over with passengers all the time, because it's going to make cities a terrible place to live, or more terrible place to live.
Well, but see, cities are actually a more attractive place to live for a lot of folks now. We're seeing this reverse exodus back to the cities. It's for a certain segment of population. So
yeah, I mean, there's actually a lot of things I like about being in cities. I like spending time in cities. It's not well, yeah. I mean, a lot of cities. There's things that annoy me, but there's things about everything in life that annoy me, just like there is with you. Come
on now. Do I ever appear annoyed?
Yeah. Continuing on. But, the idea of, like I say, of having, thousands of these things buzzing around, I think would quickly become intolerable to residents of cities. I don't think that they would like it. But, I might be totally wrong. Anyway.
The first time one of those things crashes and takes out a bunch of collateral, it's not going to be any good.
Yeah.
It's going to be a problem.
Anyway, back to this patent that Ford filed. This is actually a very interesting use of drone technology, because what it is, if we look forward to the onset of autonomous vehicles, when autonomous vehicles are out there on the road and they don't have any steering wheels or pedals in them, and a lot of times they may be driving around without even any people in them. What happens if there's a failure mode, and sensors fail, LiDAR sensors go down, or radar or cameras die, and now all of a sudden the thing is blind and it doesn't know where to go? Well, the obvious thing to do is, at that point you have to send out a flatbed to bring the thing back to a repair depot. But what Ford came up with was an idea to have these repair drones that would go out, if a vehicle reports a problem and it can't navigate itself around its city, they can send out one of these drones that can dock itself on the top of the vehicle, and the drone is equipped with a spare set of sensors, a sufficient number of sensors, probably not the full suite of sensors that would be on the vehicle, but enough that would allow it to provide information to the vehicle. So when it comes down, it docks on top of the vehicle, plugs itself in, and it starts sending the sensor data to the computer in the vehicle, enough to allow the vehicle to navigate itself back to a repair facility autonomously, without having to send out a tow truck or a flatbed to pick it up and bring it back. And so that, I think, is actually a really cool application of a drone.
I don't disagree. I mean, I think it's a good idea. And you have to solve that problem in some way. Like, just because the patent has been filed, again, doesn't mean that it's actually going to come to market. It's sort of a protective measure. You've got to come up with the idea and then protect the idea. And whether or not you actually use the idea, at least nobody else can sort of steal your thunder to a certain degree. I mean, part of the problem with a patent filing is you're letting everybody know your idea so they can hit market faster with something that's similar or exactly the same thing, and they'll wait for you to sue them about their IP. So it's kind of a fraught process, but it's interesting to see that, you know, those issues that you don't even think about with all the just constant fervor over self-driving cars. The little practical concerns, like, well, what do you do if it breaks? What do you know, how does that work? How does that get solved? Do we have to have flatbeds on standby, or what's that going to look like? You know, they're thinking about it, and they're trying to solve that problem in a variety of ways, and this is one of them.
Yeah, and like I said, I think this is a particularly clever solution to that problem.
Yeah, we'll see how well it works. Hopefully it doesn't try to dock itself to cars it's not supposed to, or a bunch of random like rogue drones. Just
that could be that. I mean, you know, there are obvious security issues with that. If someone sends out a drone, that is not in the control of the fleet operator, and it docks itself onto a random vehicle that that is set up for this, then they could potentially take over that vehicle. Hopefully the security system, the security within the vehicle's computer system is such that it's not going to accept a connection from any device that it hasn't actually requested help from. But we'll see. Hopefully they do execute that correctly.
Yeah, or we'll just have a bunch of drones around cities like random bees just swarming.
Yeah, well, that's what we're probably going to have anyway. So
it's a nice dark future we're painting.
Oh yeah.
So let's continue to look forward. We had the Geneva show, and one of the things that was there was the Jaguar I-Pace, which is apparently in production heaven, and you can order one now.
Yeah, they showed the production version of the I-Pace, which we first saw as a concept at the what year is it now? 2016 LA Auto Show. So about 15, 16 months ago. It's hard to keep track anymore. As you get older, these things fly by so fast you can't tell what year it is anymore.
I completely agree.
Yeah, but I mean the production version of the I-Pace has changed very little from that concept. The basic design is pretty much identical. But now we have full details on the specs. There was lots of speculation previously, but at the Geneva show this past week, they announced all the details, and we found out that Jaguar started taking orders from their European dealers on the 1st of March, and I believe they will start taking orders from dealers in North America sometime in May or June. The I-Pace is actually being built not at Jaguar's plant in the UK in Coventry, but it's actually being assembled by Magna Steyr in Austria.
So is that one of the reasons why they've gone pretty quickly from concept even just 2 years ago to production? That's really fast. And
well,
one of the reasons why?
It's fast, but I think, basically the car, the design was, effectively finished. I mean, they had obviously started working on this long before November of 2016, and it was already, what we saw at the LA show that year, was essentially the finished product, with very few tweaks to the design. And, at that point they were almost ready to start testing of, the final vehicle. I'm sure they were testing various mules before that. So, it seems like it went fast because in a lot of cases, when we see a concept vehicle from a manufacturer, they have not yet approved it for production. This is just an idea that they're throwing out there, and it's only after they show it and gauge customer reaction that they decide they start doing the full scale production engineering of this thing. And in this case, I think they were already well along that process before they showed us this vehicle as a concept. So it seems fast, but it's I don't think it's really any faster than any other typical program.
It's a little bit of sleight of hand.
Yeah.
I really like the I-Pace. I can't wait till it actually winds up into infiltrating media fleets. I am a little disappointed that they decided to copy Tesla door handles. That makes me a little upset with the flush-mounted door handles.
Well, at least that's about the only thing that they really copied, in terms of design. And I don't know that they're necessarily, as quite the same as the Tesla handles in that they're mechanically driven out. I think that they may be more like some of the other door handles that we've seen in the past, where it's more mechanical, where you press in on it, and, it comes. You press in on one side and it pops out. So I think it's more like that, or hopefully it is, because
that's more acceptable. Not that I, my opinion doesn't really matter. The thing, though, going against Tesla, because they're the sort of the 500-pound gorilla in this situation, the I-Pace is not terribly expensive when you consider, production is ramped. It's going to hit the market. It's going to be put together really well. The interior design and materials look really good. It starts at $69,500 for the I-Pace S, and it goes up to, I think, like 80,000 or a little over 80,000 for the HSE. So that's a pretty tight spread. And, overall, I think it's going to be a car that, for all the objective measures that we apply to a car, probably knocks it out of the park. Jaguars have been really well put together lately. Just weird to say, but
I know. I mean, you would, if you look back, 15 or 20 years, at the, one of the issues that British cars in general always had was with electrical systems. The classic, joke about, Lucas electrical systems, Lucas being the Prince of Darkness.
Right, that's why they drink warm beer, because their fridges were made by Lucas.
Exactly. The Lucas, toggle switches were labeled off, flicker, and dim. So, to have a completely electric Jaguar, just seems like a nightmare in the offing. But, recent years, Jaguar and Land Rover, quality ratings have really gone up, and they've been, getting pretty close to the top. So they've gotten a lot more reliable, a lot better built. And I have a lot of confidence in this one, and Magna, typically does a really good job of building cars for their OEM customers that that contract with them. And just for comparison, the I-Pace comes with a 90 kilowatt hour battery and dual motor drive. So it's an all-wheel drive system, and starts at $69,000. The cheapest Tesla Model X starts at $67,800. And that's with a 75 kilowatt hour battery. So, that's a smaller battery. The 100D, the price jumps up to 84 to start with. And,
look, you got to pay for those Falcon doors.
Yeah. Somewhere. Well, that's I mean, you're going to pay for those Falcon doors in multiple ways, both in terms of cost and also in the headaches that they're going to give you, because it's always fun to Google like Falcon door problems. And
watch the videos of them just like not shutting and stuff. Like, I mean, it's a neat idea, and the concept, it works to a degree. I can understand the thinking behind it. But I like that Jaguar with the I-Pace really focused on, they took the fundamentals of a car: 4 doors, 4 wheels, and it's a Jaguar, so it's luxurious inside. And then they applied a new propulsion system to it, rather than trying to completely reinvent everything all the time.
Yeah, and they actually, sorry, hold on. Hate it when video auto plays. A lot of the stuff on this vehicle is new to Jaguar. But they also, between Jaguar and Magna, they know how to build vehicles, so they're not, they've been at this for 100 years almost, or about 80 years, I guess, so they know what they're doing, and I'm confident that, that they will get this thing done right.
Well, I applaud them for bravely letting go of the Jaguar heritage tropes and pushing into something that's completely new. Like you never thought that a brand sort of built on the XK inline six and racing heritage would be going all electric. It's sort of so fast too. They're one of the first in their competitive set to be doing this, although they're going racing with the I-Pace, but it's just like they have clearly plotted a course for the future, which involves big change for Jaguar. And this is really the tip of the spear for that, I think.
Yeah, and in fact, they're not giving up on the racing heritage either, because they're, this summer, with when the next season of the Formula E championship starts, they'll be using the I-Pace for support series, the E-Trophy, the I-Pace E-Trophy series that will run alongside Formula E. So we'll get a chance to see, how it actually does on the track, in terms of, sustained performance, rather than just running a quarter mile at a time.
Well, that's one that I would buy, is the racing one, because it looks pretty bad.
Yeah, with that big wing on the back.
Yeah.
But speaking of performance EVs, well, actually, before we move on, orders for North American I-Pace, I think, start in May or June, and production of the I-Pace for North America, I think, starts in June or July. So it should be here by late summer at the latest. And that $69,000 pricing is the U.S. price, not the European price.
I'm assuming the European price is higher.
Yeah, well, because they factor in, their value added taxes and everything for the advertised price. I think the price in the UK, I think, is like £68,000, and that includes their taxes on that. So
that's still that's pretty competitive. That's
absolutely
the most expensive thing. Yeah.
Oh,
Jaguars.
yeah. And actually, before we move on, we did have a reader question that now is actually a good time to get into that. And it was from Yakov Nimoy. He was just curious about our thoughts, our experience with the touchscreens that JLR is putting in both new Range Rovers and the I-Pace. And he was a little surprised to see it so prominently featured on the I-Pace, as it makes the cockpit feel like a slightly smaller Range Rover than a Jaguar. My experience has been they sort of kind of maybe pull off blending physical rotary knobs with touchscreens. I've accepted it. My wife loves it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the show, especially if you've gotten some serious driving time with it. And if not, hope you folks get to drive the I-Pace real soon. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about that too. So as far as driving, neither of us have driven the I-Pace yet. And as far as the screen, and the interface being similar to Range Rover, the I-Pace has the same new infotainment system, which is called the In Control Touch Pro Duo system, which debuted on the Range Rover Velar, which came out last year. And so it's Jaguar Land Rover's next generation system. So it has a new interface, bigger screens, and it's actually got dual screens. So there's a 10-inch main screen and then a smaller 5.5-inch screen below that. And both the I-Pace and the Range Rover Velar have that system in there. But the thing is, over the last 10, 15 years, Jaguars and Land Rovers have always had the same infotainment systems. So while this may make the I-Pace seem like a smaller Range Rover right now, ultimately this is going to filter through both brand lineups over the next few years as they update them. And in fact, if you look at the current batch of Jaguars and Land Rover models, the F-Pace, the XF and the XE, and as well as things like the current Range Rover and Discovery, and the what's the small one? The Evoque. They all of those have the same, the previous generation in Jaguar Land Rover In Control system. They all have the same UI and the same layout. So this is just another step along the way as they'll add this into each new model as it gets updated, including the new XJ, which is expected to debut next year, also as an electric car rather than an internal combustion model.
Right. Yeah, and I even earlier versions of In Control I didn't hate. So I'm assuming this is probably even better. It's probably a little snappier. I haven't, like you said, I haven't had a chance to be in the I-Pace. I do like that they've, and our reader pointed that out too, they've got physical buttons, physical knobs, and controls that go together with that lower screen. So the lower screen displays stuff like status, but you've also got ways to quickly adjust, the fan and the temperature. There's a volume knob. There's it appears like switches above for airflow. So those things matter because adjusting the fan is something that shouldn't be hard, but sometimes takes 3 presses of a screen in some cars. So it looks really good in pictures. Hopefully it functions really well in the real world.
Yeah, I've got a Velar scheduled for first part of May, so about 6 weeks from now, and that's got the same system in there. So I'll let you know then, whether it's any good or not.
All right, we'll have to set a calendar reminder. We'll forget.
All right, and then another new EV that came out in Geneva is the Porsche Mission E Cross Turismo.
All right. Yeah. So do you like it or not?
I do like it. It looks a lot. It looks to me, it basically looks like a Panamera, the Panamera, was it the Sport Turismo, which is the wagon version of the new Panamera, the second generation Panamera, but with the Mission E front fascia on it. And then of course, because everybody wants a crossover, they've done the Audi all-road Subaru Outback thing and jacked it up an inch or two and put some black wheel arch extensions on it. I can live with that. Because it doesn't sit up high like a traditional SUV. It's a little bit higher. I'd rather have something that sits has more of the profile of the Panamera Sport Turismo, but I could live with this, and this is going to be yet another in this burgeoning segment of EV crossovers, luxury EV crossovers, that kicked off with the Model X, but now you've got the I-Pace coming later this summer, early fall will be the Audi e-tron Quattro, and then this Porsche Mission E, the 4-door sedan / hatchback version that we originally saw as a concept a couple of years ago should be arriving towards the end of this year, early 2019. The production version, we've already seen spy photos of it running at the Nürburgring, and a couple of weeks ago, the Porsche executive in charge of their EV program was throwing some shade at Tesla, about how their cars can only run really fast for a couple of launches at a time, and then the performance gets throttled. Because their batteries and motors and electronics overheat, and so now the Mission E, which is coming, they said that this thing is going to be capable of providing the same kind of sustained performance that any other Porsche ever built is capable of doing. And I'm sure that the same thing will apply to this Cross Turismo, which is basically going to be, the same platform underneath, but, with a slightly different body style on it.
Yeah, I really, really like it. I think it's great looking. Porsche is clearly investing in moving past tradition and history while they're still serving those customers. They're looking to survive. And so there's some of the echoes of what happened when they first brought out the Cayenne 20 years ago, where everybody freaked out and then it funded a bunch of really awesome stuff. And I like that it has that Mission E sort of front end, the squared off lights and stuff. It's almost like Porsche is evolving past the stupid 911 finally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that look, with those headlights with the 4 LED headlights arranged in an array like that. That's actually something that we first saw on the 919 hybrid, the Le Mans car, a few years ago. And they've been migrating that across a lot of the other models. The Macan has something similar to that. The Mission E has that, and now this Mission E Cross Turismo as well.
Yeah, and they're flattening it out. It's not a round headlamp. It's actually almost more rectangular with sort of soft corners, and it's just there's change afoot. And I think that while Porsche has this right now, this purist fan base that is spending ridiculous money for old things, and that's fine. It's their right to make things bad for the rest of us. But the next generation of Porsches have to appeal to people with money, and that's not necessarily the same people that are buying the old stuff. It has to appeal to people who are buying new cars and want the something fresh. And so this is really, it's a lot different, and it's almost like the Porsche tree has branched, right? There's going to be the electric side of Porsche that they're clearly going after with all the developments you've seen under the umbrella of Porsche for the last however many years now. And there's still the awesome, ridiculous sports cars as well. So there's two different sides to Porsche now, at least two. So it's been really, really interesting to watch. Performance wise, it's of course going to be impressive. It's going to deliver a lot of power very quickly, and it's going to have torque vectoring and all this. Actually, all that stuff gets a lot easier with an electric powertrain, doesn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. Especially because typically, with these things, you're using a dual motor setup, one motor at each axle. So you don't have, with a traditional all-wheel drive system, now you've got to have a power takeoff, at whichever end the powertrain is at, and then an or a drive shaft that goes to the opposite end of the car. So there's a lot more packaging complexity and a lot more mass and other stuff that actually hurts performance. And with an electric, you just throw a motor at each axle, driving the wheels at that axle, and typically they're driving through a simple reduction gearbox with a differential. And if you put a torque vectoring system on that, you can have four-wheel torque vectoring, with a fairly simple mechanism at each axle of the car, and nothing in between except for a ginormous battery pack.
Yeah, and that battery pack is something they're saying they'll be able to recharge in like 15 minutes. And this is where I'm like, okay, come on now.
One of the things that Porsche is doing with their EV powertrain that is different, up until now, most of the hybrid and electric drive systems that have come to market typically are around 300 volt architectures, 300, sometimes as high as 360 volts, which that's fine, but for more power output. Now you've got to have higher currents, and that means bigger, heavier wires, to get the resistance down. And so that adds weight. And that's one of the issues that, with Tesla, that causes them to have to limit their performance, after you've been running hard for more than a couple of minutes, because you start building up all this heat and resistance in there, because you have to have really high currents, because the voltage, 360 volts is not low, but it's lower than optimal. And so what Porsche has done with their system, their architecture, their vehicles are designed around an 800 volt architecture. So with higher voltage, you can have less current, smaller wires, and it's not going to generate as much heat. It's going to be more efficient overall. And that's one of the things that's going to help them with their performance. I'm not sure what the voltage on the I-Pace is. I'm going to have to ask about that. But the Porsche systems are all 800 volts. And then the other thing they're doing is designing it to support 350 kilowatt charging rates.
So yeah, I guess that's my question is, the system operates at 800 volts. What are are they 800 volt batteries, or is there some kind of transformer or something going on in there? Or
no, I believe it's designed around an 800 volt battery. So the battery pack is architected to put out 800 volts. And
that's a lot of volts.
Yeah, it certainly is. And then, the 350 kilowatt charging rates, so that they've got a 350, a charging system that can support 350 kilowatts. Right now, there's no 350 kilowatt DC fast chargers out there, but they're actually starting to deploy those over the next year or so. There's a joint venture between several of the European automakers. I think BMW, Mercedes, and Volkswagen, and I think Ford are all part of this. It's called Ionity, and they're building out a network of DC fast charging stations in Europe. And then there's also a separate consortium here in the U.S. Or North America that's building out DC fast charging here. And then on top of that, we've also got the Electrify America, which is the company set up to use the money from the Volkswagen diesel settlement, the $2 billion from the Volkswagen diesel settlement, to also deploy DC fast charging across the U.S. And so between all those, they're planning to put in DC charging systems that initially most of them will be either 100 or 150 kilowatts. The Tesla superchargers are usually 120 kilowatts. They're initially putting in 150 kilowatt systems, but they are systems that are designed to be upgradable to 300 up to 350 kilowatts and beyond. So they're modular systems that can put out more power as needed.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. So my guess is that in Europe they're going to roll out one network and build up the infrastructure there, and in the United States they're going to pick a completely different one. And none of the plugs are going to match, and the standards are going to be different.
Well, first of all, in Europe, they have a plug standard that everybody's using. Here in the U.S., we have an SAE plug. We have an SAE plug standard, and then there's also CHAdeMO. Actually, there's also CHAdeMO in Europe, which Nissan is pretty much the only one that uses that. All of these networks are all designed around the CCS, the SAE combo plug. And even if the European plugs and the North American plugs are different, how often do cars drive from New York to Paris?
No, I know. It's just some of it is just the ridiculousness, and it shifts the burden now to the manufacturers and the infrastructure. Because really, we've proven that the cars are possible. The problem is now putting the energy back into the batteries.
Right.
And I mean, not now. That's always been the biggest stumbling block. The cars, there's an appetite for it, and the refueling, essentially, infrastructure is really lagging, and that is where a lot of development needs to happen. And it's where a lot of development is happening. And until that's solved, we can come out with lots of these, Mission E Cross Turismo and Model X and Jaguar I-Pace and all that. We can keep doing that. At a certain point, we need to make sure that we can recharge them as easily as we go fill our cars up. And so what has happened with gas cars is, there's two different emission standards between, and there's more than that, but just between, Europe and the US, the emission standards are different enough that it's a real pain in the ass, to just you've got to federalize a car that is fine in Europe because it doesn't meet American emission standards. And it's a cost. And ultimately the automakers bear that cost, and so consumers bear it. So hopefully they're not stupid this time around, and they figure out how to make a global charging standard that just works for everything. They can develop it once.
Yeah, like I said, the two primary standards, the two primary non-Tesla standards used in Europe and North America, even though the connectors are slightly different, they're similar enough that it's not a big deal, to take, a car from Europe and install you can even do it with adapters, and in fact, this applies to Tesla as well. I mean, you can, when you buy a Tesla, it comes with an adapter to plug in a standard J1772 connector, which is the one that everybody except Tesla uses. And it's also used in Europe as well. So that's the standard, level 1, level 2 charger for 120 or 240 volt charging. And then, we have the SAE combo charger, which is it's the same connector, but with 2 extra pins on it for DC fast charging that's used here in North America. So they're all close enough that it's not the same as having to deal with different emission standards.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it works out.
Yeah.
I need something to rant about, Sam.
Well, rant about Chatamo then. That's the one that's kind of supercharge. The Tesla charging connector and Chatamo. Those are the kind of the 2 outliers.
Yeah, well, Tesla wants to own everything. They want to be like sort of vertically integrated. No, we do it the Tesla way. This is like the idea that you've got to have dongles for your car just to refuel it is. We talked about USB-C last week a little bit, and this is sort of the same thing. Just like, just make one plug. Make one plug.
I know. I know. Well, actually, in Europe, in Europe, for phones, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, the EU mandated that all phones had to support, standard USB connectors, and so when you buy an iPhone in Europe, in the box it comes with a micro SD adapter. That plugs into the Lightning port and allows you to charge from a micro SD cable. And now they're switching over to USB-C. And there has been some discussion, in Europe of defining the same kind of standard for EVs so that everything has to use the same standardized combo connector in Europe, which means that, Tesla would either have to convert their cars for the European market, or supply the adapter, which they already do. Although I know they have an adapter for 240 volt charging. I don't think they have one that will support DC fast charging from the European charge connectors. And then China, of course, has that's the other issue, is China has their own different standard, and so we'll see what happens there.
That's true. How provincial of us to think about Europe and the U.S. and forget that China is a really giant and expanding market still. So.
Yep. All right.
So you went to a robotics competition you were a judge for.
Yeah. So the reason why we're recording this on Sunday instead of a few days ago is because I spent the last couple of days in Flint at my alma mater at what is now known as Kettering University. Back in my day, it was GMI Engineering and Management Institute, and I was invited to be a judge for the FIRST Robotics competition, their regional event of the FIRST Robotics competition. FIRST Robotics started in the mid 1990s. It was founded by Dean Kamen, the mastermind behind the Segway, and it's a competition for high school students. Well, it started off as a competition for high school students to build robots. To learn how to build and program robots and then, test them. And over the years, it's expanded. They've expanded the program downwards, to early elementary school levels. And I think the earliest programs actually now start in kindergarten, with using Lego systems to build Lego-based robots. But the original one, the FIRST Robotics competition for high school students, the teams. The way it works is that at the beginning of the year, the schools that have a team, they're everybody that wants to compete, the organizers created a new game every year, and you get a kit of parts that you can start with, and then you can add to that. If you can afford it, if you're able to find some sponsors and get some money, you can build on top of that and make your robots more sophisticated. But there are certain restrictions, like the robots are limited to 200 pounds total weight and various other things. But the game, each year they come up with a new game, and they publish that at the beginning of the year, and then the student teams, based on what the robots have to do, they design their robots to try to work and function in that game. And so over the years, they've added things like, for example, they now have an autonomous mode test. So there's several different modes. where, depending on how much the robot can achieve, the teams get certain points. And when they come to the competition, they have matches. The teams match up and pair off against each other in qualification rounds and then in the playoffs. And what they do is
like Robot Wars, where they beat the hell out of each other.
No, they don't beat each other up. But like, for example, this year's game is called Power Up, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But basically, it's kind of like taking a classic 80s video game and bringing it into real life with the robots. And they have, the robots have to pick up and move power cubes, which are basically just milk crates that are covered in a yellow wrapper. So they look like yellow boxes, and they have to stack them. There's a scale that's about 6 feet up off the ground, and each team has to put theirs on one side of the scale, and whichever team can get more, can take control of the scale. There's also a couple of low to the ground, similar to scale. They call them switches, and they stack the power up boxes in there. And then there's also other stuff, a couple of other things. Basically, they have to go around the play field, pick up the boxes, and get them into these various locations. And whichever team, and for the matches, they actually have alliances. So there's actually 3 teams will be in an alliance on each side of the match, playing together, and then they all get their points. They combine their points, and it's really cool to watch. And then there's also a bunch of various other awards that are given out to teams for things like industrial design, innovations in control and how they control their robots, things like their teamwork, their safety stuff. And so they're encouraged to learn about and do all of the kinds of things that you do in any kind of engineering and technical environment in the real world. And so what the judges do is we go around and we interview all the teams in the pits during the competition phase, and then we rank them and we decide which teams are going to win each of the awards. And so that's what I spent the last couple of days doing, and it was a lot of fun getting to talk to these kids and see what they've learned. And there's a lot of really impressive kids out there, and this is a great program. And if there's anybody out there who's got kids in a school that is participating in FIRST Robotics, I definitely encourage you to get your kids involved if they're at all interested in anything. And it's not just technical stuff. There's building the machines, the manufacturing side, learning about manufacturing the parts and putting it all together. But there's also programming involved. There's marketing involved. So even for kids that aren't interested in the technical stuff, that might be interested in other aspects, some of the business stuff, in terms of going out and getting sponsors and putting together sponsor pitches and promoting the program. There's a lot of ways to get involved with FIRST Robotics. And so if your kid's school isn't involved in FIRST Robotics, definitely take a look at seeing if you can help out to get a FIRST Robotics program started. And for adults, you can be mentors to the teams, and help them out. You can help them with finding sponsorship, and there's all kinds of ways to participate.
So what impressed you the most?
There one thing that was pretty amazing. There were several rookie teams this year. And this was a regional event, for Southern Michigan. There was 41 teams altogether at this event, and there was one team. I say team, but it was literally one girl. She came from a very small school, a high school with only about 200 students in total, and they at one point had about 5 kids that were participating, but most of them, kind of dropped off along the way. And there was this one girl that really wanted to do this and just pressed forward with getting this thing built. And, there were a couple of other teams that actually provided a whole bunch of assistance just over the past couple of weeks to help her get the robot built, and she put in, probably, about 30 or 40 hours a week, just over the last couple of weeks, building her robot. And, with some help, like I said, from a couple of other teams, with some technical assistance. And, she came to the competition and, competed, all on her own. She had just her mom and a teacher, helping out, and things like that. But then there were, some of the other more established teams, where, they're doing things beyond just the, building their own robots. There was a team from Port Huron that, one of the things that they do is they've organized, with some of the other schools, for, a program they call Michigan Wheels for Kids. And what they do is they modify Power Wheels, the little Fisher-Price battery operated vehicles, for young kids that are physically challenged, and so they're modifying these vehicles to allow, to give to kids, that are, in some way physically challenged, so that they can drive around in these things. And that's, it's a real good community outreach program.
Power Wheels are super cool and awesome. I have 2 of them in the shed right now.
Yeah. I mean, we had a Jeep when our kids were little, and, they loved it.
Yeah, apparently there's like adults that go through and they like completely upgrade the electrical systems and the motors, and they drag race and
there's a whole power racing series as part of the maker movement. I actually wrote a piece for Autoblog back in 2010 when they had the first maker fair here in Detroit. And, they brought the power racing series here, and there's a video. I'll include a link to that in the show notes as well. But yeah, people take these, they take Power Wheels vehicles and heavily modify them and race them, with adults riding on them, which is pretty hysterical to watch.
I mean, I've driven both of we had a 6-volt one that, because Power Wheels are this, not to get completely off track, but they're these, people will go to the store and they'll spend hundreds of dollars on them. And then when the kid grows up and the battery wears out, they give them away. Or they throw them away.
Mm-hmm.
So
put them out on the curb.
And so all that's ever wrong with them is the batteries. So you just replace the battery.
I went through a couple of batteries on ours, and they kept going for years.
I remember driving around the backyard riding the 6-volt F-150 or whatever that we picked up out of the trash. When I put a new battery in it, and the 6-volt ones have oomph. And the 12 volts are even better. So. Yeah. Anyway, that's my little Power Wheels vignette. So is FIRST? You said it's nationwide, like FIRST Robotics?
Yeah, it's in fact it's global now. I mean, there's FIRST Robotics competitions in a number of countries now, and it's all over the United States. I think if you let me find it's
firstinspires.org.
Yep, firstinspires.org. So you can go there to find out all the information about it, to participate or to be a volunteer. They always need help at the events, at the various events. And it runs, for the events, typically run over a 2 or 3 month period in the springtime. They have various regionals and then state level events. And then on to the World Championships, which there's 2 World Championship events this year, one in Houston and then another one here in Detroit at Cobo Hall, which I believe are in June. It's definitely, a fantastic thing to participate in. As I said, there's all kinds of ways that your kids can be a part of it, even if they're not necessarily inclined towards engineering or design or manufacturing.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. With that PSA out of the way,
you're going to go back again.
I absolutely plan to do this some more and participate in these events again in the future.
Awesome.
All right.
That sounds like a cool opportunity for you and the kids. We had some listener questions.
So let's see. Let me find this one here. Where did it go?
You must be looking on Facebook where you can't find anything ever.
No, actually, this one was also an email. So this one was from Glenn F. We actually got this about a week and a half ago, and he says he and his girlfriend got in a car crash in February. They live in Peoria, Illinois, and we got some snow and slick conditions. And we're driving on a country road in our 2005 Focus hatchback. Started swerving and got hit head on by a GMC Terrain. They both blacked out from the crash, which is lucky since they don't remember the accident. She's unfortunately suffered a pelvis fracture, and he had a broken right leg, upper right arm, and cracked a couple of ribs. I'm glad that everybody survived. Those are serious injuries, but they're all injuries that you can hopefully recover from. Anyway, they're thinking about what to do for their next car to replace the Focus, and they'd like it to be able to transport at least 2 road bikes. And I guess they've got a couple of bikes that are fairly valuable. So they want to be able to transport them inside the vehicle. And they also want to make sure they have all-wheel drive to better handle inclement weather. I've tried to tell her we could get snow tires for the vehicle, which absolutely, I think both of us would very much recommend that. It's never a bad thing to have winter tires when the temperatures drop, even if you don't get much snow.
Yeah. With all-wheel drive.
Yeah. I mean, all-wheel drive, will just let you, use the whatever little bit of traction you have. But if there's no traction because you have terrible tires, you're still going to be out of luck. So definitely, snow tires, even if you don't get much snow where you are, if it does get cold, if it stays below about 40 degrees for extended periods of time, winter tires are definitely a good thing because the rubber is formulated differently so that it stays pliable. Even all season tires, the rubber gets harder when the temperature gets cold, and so you don't get as much grip. And so winter tires are formulated to stay more pliable down to much colder temperatures, so you'll have better traction even on dry pavement. And then third requirement is modern amenities like Bluetooth, Android Auto, CarPlay, and heated seats. So Bluetooth is pretty much standard on pretty much anything new nowadays. Heated seats, it depends on the vehicle. Most, pretty much everything except like the really low end vehicles are at least available with heated seats, if not standard in some cases on some of the more expensive models. They've looked online at the Mazda CX-5, Jeep Renegade, Subaru Impreza, Forester, Subaru Outback. Glenn also has a 2012 Cadillac SRX with 74,000 miles. We found a 2012 SRX for $16,500 on Craigslist.
Is that the old first generation?
No,
SRX?
the 2012 would be the second gen. So that's the front wheel drive one that's based on the Theta platform, and 74,000 miles. 16.5. I'm not sure about the pricing. It sounds reasonable. I would suggest taking a look at either kbb.com or Edmunds and go through the used car pricing, based on the equipment that's on it and the mileage and condition. But in terms of reliability, it should be fine. As long as it's had proper maintenance, had its oil changes and tire rotations and everything, there's nothing about that particular vehicle. It's got GM's 3.6 liter twin cam V6, which is a good engine. It's never had any particular issues with it. So, it should be good. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Anytime you're buying a used car, you have to, check the maintenance records and things like that. And, I would suggest, maybe, spend a little bit if you can, spend a little money, take it to a mechanic you trust to give it a once over, and make sure everything looks okay. But, like I said, there's nothing about about a 2012 SRX that you necessarily need to look out for.
Yeah.
One vehicle I'd probably cross off the list is the Renegade, because if you want to carry your bikes inside the vehicle, the Renegade's pretty small. Impreza, same thing. I'm not sure you'd actually be able to fit them in there. But the others are probably fine.
it's kind of a wide swath of vehicles, right? Like you're going from Renegade and Impreza to like talking about an SRX. So if luxury is important, that's something to consider. But the car I was going to recommend is actually the Outback, because I think it ticks all those boxes, and it's a little physically larger, so you can definitely get road bikes and other stuff in there as well. And I mean, it just doesn't sound like there's any need to transport kids or dogs or anything like that. But if there are, an Outback will handle it a little bit more gracefully as well. So, I mean, my suggestion would be an Outback. They have a great safety record as well. They offer the eyesight system. Even if you're buying one used, it's been around long enough where you can get an Outback with that as well. So,
yeah, I mean, Outback's a great choice. It should be fairly reliable. It's going to give you plenty of room, for, whatever you want to do. If you got an active lifestyle, I mean, if you got a couple of road bikes, you probably, you're what, 28, 31, I think probably have an active lifestyle. So, whether you want to go camping or, whatever else it might be, you're going to be able to throw all your stuff in the back of an Outback without any real difficulty. I also, I really like the CX-5. I'm always a Mazda fan. You haven't said what your budget is. So I'm not sure how much you're looking to spend. But either one of those is probably a really good choice. Another one to consider, again, depending on how much you're prepared to spend, that you might want to take a look at is the new Buick Regal Tour X. It's their crossover wagon thing, which it's similar in concept to the Outback, maybe slightly larger. Pretty close in size, I think, actually, to the Outback. That one is, I don't think the Outback has support for CarPlay or Android Auto yet. I'm not sure.
It may not, but especially if you buy used, there's actually some good aftermarket head unit options for Subarus in particular. They look like factory. So there's that. The aftermarket loves Subaru.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of stuff out there. But yeah, the SRX, is also a good choice. You said you had one as a rental car and liked it. So, I mean, if it's a car you already know that you like, if that one's in good shape, or you find another one, similar, I wouldn't necessarily turn away from that one either.
Yeah, I don't love the Thetas that much to fall in love with them, I guess.
Yeah.
And for me, like, if you're going to go Theta, you might as well just go Equinox and get some more space inside. Cause it is essentially the same thing as the SRX, but it's much less luxurious. So it will feel very different, but you can get it with the 4-cylinder if you want as well for better fuel economy, although kind of comes out in the wash cause you got to put your foot in it all the time. Another one that comes to mind too is the Golf All-Track, or whatever the hell they call it. I think it's the All-Track, right?
Yeah, it's all-road. Is it all, or is it All-Track? I don't know. Whatever the jacked up all-wheel drive golf wagon is.
It's a little smaller. It's definitely smaller than the Outback, and I think you're right. I think the Outback is smaller than the Buick. So to make sure your bikes will fit in it, but it's another decent option, and it drives really well. I'm not sure you're down for the long-term Volkswagen ownership experience, which Sam has talked about
repeatedly.
Yeah, that's a good option. I like the CX-5 as well. I get concerned just knowing how difficult it is to put bikes, multiple bikes in our Grand Cherokee. Something the size of a CX-5 or a Forester, or even the smaller, the Golf wagon.
Well, if you can take the front wheels off, which you typically can, then that might be doable.
Yeah, for sure. They generally have all the wheels on quick releases and stuff. So I don't know. I will say one of the what's the SRAM, SRAM. They make shifters and bike hardware. They have support vehicles for their cycling teams, and they are all Volvo wagons. So
okay,
a nice used cross country, nice used V70 XC no shame in that. And that's a pretty decent sized wagon as well. So.
Yeah, and just checking the Subaru site, the 2018 Outback. So if you are looking to buy new, the 2018 Subarus do have CarPlay and Android Auto built in. If you're going used, you should be able to find an aftermarket unit that'll fit in there. Or if you go new, they already have it built in. So that's something to consider there. And you mentioned the Equinox. The new Equinox is actually really nice as well. So again, if you're looking new, the Equinox, it also has CarPlay and Android Auto support, as well as all of the other stuff. So that's another one to consider.
Yeah. I think we've solved that problem. Can I interest you maybe in a Crown Victoria with a trailer hitch, which you can mount one of those hitch bike things to? Or you could probably get the bikes.
Well, he wants the bikes on the inside, though.
You can put them in the trunk. You can put them in the back seat. Nobody's going to get the back seat. Just take the back seat out. It's fine. Just please come take the car. All right.
Dan will pay you to take it away.
No, I will not do.
Will you at least fill the tank? Put a tank of gas in it?
I'll fill the tires.
Okay.
All right. I think we've done it. We got to both the questions and the podcast topics, and I think that's about it. So we should come back in a couple of days and do another episode before a week goes by.
Yeah. Or at some point this week.
Some point, yeah. So until then, thanks for listening, and we'll catch everybody next time.
Talk to you later.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.